share some details with you. At about 8:03 a.m. this morning, we received a 911 emergency call into our communications center about an active shooter situation here at the Fiamma Incorporated business. This is a worldwide business that primarily provides accessories for RVs. At about 8:45 a.m. this morning, we were dispatched here to this call. Deputies arrived on scene just 2 minutes later to the active shooter call for service. Once they arrived here, they found multiple individuals that had been shot. 3 male victims were deceased at that time. 1 female victim was deceased. A 5th person, a male, was transported to the Orlando Regional Medical Center where he subsequently died as a result of his injuries. There were 7 survivors, individuals who were inside this business who are being interviewed presently by detectives from the Orange County Sheriff's Office. We have a 45-year-old subject who is deceased inside as a result of his own means. The individual was armed with a handgun and a knife this morning. There's no indication that he used a knife on any of the victims, but shot 5 innocent people this morning and then turned the gun on himself and killed himself. The individual in question is a former employee of this business. He was fired sometime in April of this year. So he was a disgruntled employee that came back to this business this morning. In terms of our history of this business,
4
we
people
have
killed.
very few
1 other
records
person
of any significance here. However, about 3 years ago, in June of 2014, we did respond to this business in which the subject who is responsible for the deaths this morning was the subject of a workplace violence incident in which he allegedly battered another employee here in the business. There were no charges actually of that time. In terms of this subject, this 45-year-old subject, when we look into his criminal history, what we have found is that he has a criminal history minor in nature. Charges such as possession of marijuana, DUI, and misdemeanor battery. At this time, we have no indication that this subject is a member of any subversive type organization. We have no indication that this subject is a participant in any type of terror organization. What this is at this point is likely a workplace violence incident. We will get more into the details of the investigation as it unfolds. At this time, we have designated a reunification location for the family members. What we're asking individuals who may be related to persons who work at this business, we have set up at Full Sail University, which is located at 3535 North Forsyth Road, a family reunification site. Families are able to respond there to a building called the Live One Building, the Live One Building. We have deputy sheriffs who are there who will direct family members to that particular location. We also have a phone number that has been set up for individuals to call should they wish to receive information. The phone number is area code 407-679-0100, extension 3087. And I'll repeat that. Area code 407-679-0100, extension 3087. At this point, I'm going to ask Mayor Jacobs to come up. She's going to make some statements from a community perspective. She will then be followed once again by the local representative of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and then the special agent in charge of our local Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and then Fire Chief Otto Droids will come forward. We will then take some questions after they speak.
Thank you, Sheriff.
First, I wish to express my regrets, my sympathy, my sorrow for the family members and the friends of those that we lost this morning. Unfortunately, we've seen this play itself out in our community and in other communities across the nation. And it is incumbent upon all of us not to become complacent or become callous to these horrific situations, but for each of our citizens to be vigilant. If they see something that seems abnormal, they need to say something. I want to commend Sheriff Demings and his entire team that stands behind us, our first responders, for their swift action to be on site and to assess the situation as quickly as possible. One thing we know about Central Florida is we have expert law enforcement men and women, and we have a community that cares and that has shown that compassion time and time again. And a community that I know will display that same compassion for the families that have lost their loved ones here today. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ron Hopper. I'm the Assistant Special Agent in charge for the FBI here in Orlando. Obviously, our thoughts and prayers go out to the victims and family members of this tragic incident. Nothing really to add other than to say that as we would in any active shooter situation, shortly after the call came into the Orange County Sheriff's Office, the FBI responded in force as we would in any active shooter situation. We will remain with the Sheriff's Office until our resources are no longer necessary to help them complete the investigation, and we always stand shoulder to shoulder with all the men and women of law enforcement here in Central Florida, to include FDLE, OPD, and obviously the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Danny Banks with FDLE. Proud that FDLE responded here with the FBI to support the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Again, our role is to come out today to try to evaluate, was this related to a terrorism incident? What I'll tell you is, whether it's a terrorism incident or not, which we do not believe it is, it's still an incident of violence in our community. So our hearts and prayers go out to the families of the victims in this incident. I'll give great support to the sheriff and his staff. We know we've lost several individuals due to violence today, but 7 other individuals' lives were saved by the quick actions of the Orange County Sheriff's deputies that got here within 2 minutes of this incident occurring. I think that's an important recognition we give those deputies and the members of the Orange County Sheriff's Office. So we're glad from FDLE to continue to support the effort here in the reunification of the families and ensuring our community that we still have a measure of safety that we all have to be a part of, and we'll continue to champion this cause of see something, say something. Information that may be indicators of this type of activity in our community needs to get to law enforcement so we can try to prevent these from happening again in the future. So thank you, Sheriff.
That was a live press conference you're taking a look at in Orlando after a shooting, yet another active shooting incident in the United States, coming almost on the 1-year anniversary of the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando, one of the worst shooting incidents in the United States. The latest this hour that we do know, 5 people have been killed at that shooting. It was at a workplace in Orange County. Police say they believe this was a workplace-related shooting and don't believe it was terrorism, but they still mark the violence. Authorities were able to quickly respond. When they got there on the scene, they found 3 men shot, as well as a woman. Another person was taken to a nearby hospital. Again, the death toll right now stands at 5. A gunman, police say, opened fire at that business headquarters in Orange County. That is in the outskirts around 8:30 this morning, about 2.5 hours ago. The man killed 4 people before turning the gun on himself. Authorities believe the shooter has been identified as what they're calling a disgruntled employee. He was fired back in April. The Orange County Sheriff's Office tweeted to say the following: the OCSO is working a shooting scene. It has been stabilized. They were able to quickly control the situation. The FBI also respond. We just heard from the mayor as well. All right, let me now go to Glenn Carl, joining us live from the United States, a former intelligence officer. Glenn, thanks for joining us. Yet another shooting incident in the United States. I mean, all too common. We see this every few months, this time almost on the 1-year anniversary of the Pulse nightclub shooting. Certainly this brings up an important point about gun control and the debate of having guns in the U.S.
Well, my career, my job was an easy one, actually, because I only had to deal with terrorists and international organized crime. who are on the whole rational actors and not wholly indiscriminate and not everywhere, compared to the domestic American law enforcement officials and society that has to deal with the problem of gun violence. And there are 11,000 deaths by handguns per year. So since 9/11, there have been something like 200,000 Americans killed by handguns. And in all of the military actions and the wars that the United States has fought in the past 15 years, there have been between 4,000 and 5,000 American soldiers killed. And yet, it's considered by at least about half of the population a right for everyone to bear arms. And with the Republican leadership now in a majority in most states and the federal government, there are moves and laws being passed to allow concealed carry, which means that you can carry your weapons hidden inside your belt or under your jacket into public establishments like bars, even sometimes, where people will get drunk, or some are advocating in schools. That's the reality. So this is not a surprise. It's yet another tragedy, and I'll make a prediction. We will hear the gun proponent, defenders of rights, say now is not the time to debate gun control measures or the laws. The laws are clear. We should all come together and grieve the loss of the victims. All right. Which is a kind sounding thing to say, but just defers any debate.
All right, Glenn, we'll come back to you in just a moment, but a little bit more perspective about the situation of guns in the fabric of U.S. society, that getting a gun and a law has been debated for years. Public opinion on the issue is almost evenly split. Reports suggest about 50% of Americans support more gun control and 47% are advocating gun rights. The firearms business is vital to the U.S. economy. The annual revenue, in fact, of gun and ammunition manufacturing stands at approximately $13.5 billion. For many Americans, the gun represents the heart of their nation's foundation and identify it as well as a symbol of freedom, the right to keep and bear arms, part of the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. It is the regular defense of current gun laws. All right, let me now go to our senior editor, Surya Gangadharan, joining us live from the WION newsroom. Surya, we've seen this unfold in the United States time and time again, whether it's a concert, whether it is at a movie hall, whether it's at an elementary school, or in this case, a workplace where people are upset. They bring a gun and an active shooting scene is unfolded. Certainly that brings about the debate. How is this going to unfold, and what will the U.S. President Donald Trump, perhaps, how is this going to all play out? In fact, he just tweeted with the London attack saying it was knives. Why aren't we talking about that? And a day after this, we see this. Surya.
Well, I think Trump supports the right of every American to bear arms, and I don't see any great reform in that line of thinking. One hopes that, since you have people like Ivanka Trump sitting in the White House, perhaps there could be some sense emanating from there, but we'll just really have to see where it goes. I think what's interesting from our own point of view is that when we see how many million firearms there are with every American household, let's try and look at the situation here. I mean, growing up as a middle-class kid, I don't recall ever seeing weapons anywhere. I do vaguely recall the army giving my dad a pistol. That was during the war. I think 65 or 71 war, I'm not very sure. And they took it back after everything was over. So this is not something that we are really accustomed to seeing. Although I understand there is a flourishing trade in country-made weapons, which are largely unlicensed and also dangerous because they're so unsafe and so crudely made. But that's about all we hear from here, although I do understand that across police, state polices and all over India, there is a demand for more gun licenses. So I'm not sure that's a very good idea too.
Many Americans certainly split on the issue. Let me now go to Yoshita Singh. She is a PTI senior correspondent joining us live from New York. Yoshita, thanks for your input. Let's get straight to the story. 5 people killed in a workplace shooting. We also believe the shooter is dead. An active shooting situation yet again. Investigators ruling out terrorism, but certainly this brings about the issue of the highly contested gun control issue in the United States. What are you picking up this hour?
Sure. As you mentioned, it was a work-related incident. The authorities in Florida saying that the shooter who killed himself after firing in the area, he was a disgruntled ex-employee who had been fired, and he came back to this work facility and shot 5 people, injuring about 7 to 10 others. So clearly, I mean, it's a very disturbing trend that we have seen in America in the last few months and years. And also, it's worth noting that the shooting comes just about a year after the attack on the Pulse nightclub. Remember the gay nightclub in Orlando, the same area where this shooting occurred today, where 50 people were dead in one of the worst mass shootings in the United States history. So again, a shooting incident occurring after almost a year after the Orlando gay nightclub incident. It raises a lot of concerns, and people have been calling for tighter gun laws in the U.S., given that people here are free to carry arms, and then these arms are then used not just for quote-unquote terrorist purposes, but also in this incident by a disgruntled ex-employee who just shows up at the workplace again the first week of the day and shoots his former colleagues. So a very disturbing trend. And even though President Donald Trump had, after the London attacks, sort of tweeted that he had said that, do you notice we are not having a gun debate right now? I mean, he has to take more action rather than just tweeting on what needs to be done to control this gun violence that's spiraling out of control clearly in the country.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let me also give a quick update that we are getting in from Twitter from the Orange County Sheriff's Office in Florida. Here's what we know. There's going to be another update at 1 o'clock local time. That's about 10:30 here in New Delhi. The Sheriff's Office says we are on a heightened alert from the tragic incidents across the globe. We cannot connect this incident to any global terrorism. No reports of any specific threats to the business. The shooter's name will be released after the family members are announced. What we do know is the shooter was carrying a gun as well as a knife. He was fired from the business back in April and shot former co-workers. So that's the latest that we know. 5 people killed in a Florida business. It happened around 8 o'clock this morning from a disgruntled employee. Let me go back to Glenn Carl standing by in Massachusetts. Glenn, we've seen this time and time again. It seems like this debate continuously happens. I mean, in San Bernardino in California, there was a very similar situation, another workplace-related shooting. At this point, the gun control issue is back in the spotlight, but it seems like nothing really is moving forward. Americans seem like they're split on whether or not they should bear arms. Why is that the case when the whole world really has a different perspective?
Well, 2 points. I think there are many points to make. The polling consistently shows year after year after year, a majority of Americans are in favor of stronger gun control laws and measures. However, the Republicans control the majority of our legislatures and Congress and the Supreme Court now, actually. And so the laws don't change. And there's another reason why they do not. The 3 strongest lobbies in Washington are widely reputed or accepted to be the Israeli lobby, the Greek lobby, which is very strong, the Turkish lobby is also quite good, and the National Rifle Association, which finances with huge amounts of money candidates so long as the candidates, who are generally Republicans, oppose any measure whatsoever to regulate the sale and purchase of firearms. So the society is legally paralyzed, although a majority of citizens would like to see stricter regulations. All
right, Glenn, we'll come back to you in just a second. I also want to bring some quick perspective on this story. Donald Trump, when he was campaigning last year, here's what Donald Trump, the U.S. president, had to say. This was when he was campaigning in Louisville last year on the 20th of May. Quote, "This is the most basic rights of all. I'm going to put criminals behind bars and guarantee that law-abiding Americans have the right to self-defense, 100%, end quote. That's what Donald Trump said last year during the campaign. So certainly this brings up an interesting perspective. Let me go back to Surya Gangadharan. There we see Donald Trump's quote addressing that everybody has the right to self-defense. I mean, Donald Trump has certainly made a lot of bold moves, a lot of controversial moves. Now he has to deal with the situation of gun control on a very divided America, dealing with mass shootings.
Well, yes, but I don't think that's going to change things very much. I think there's always a tipping point, when people say that so much and enough, I don't think that's been reached as yet for whatever reason. And probably we'll have more of these incidents as we go along. I mean, one interesting point that comes up here is the fact that we in India don't want to see our own policemen armed, because we know how they are. And even a pistol with a constable is seen as, a little extreme. We do find more and more policemen in the streets of Delhi who are armed. I think it's a little disturbing given the character of our police. And hopefully that trend will diminish. We certainly don't want to reach the kind of situation we have in the US, where cops tend to shoot first and ask questions later.
And Surya, good point. You brought up an interesting perspective about India and how the gun control works here. Perhaps, America, we see so many shootings, but here in South Asia, we typically don't see that type of mass shooting or an active shooter seen, despite such heavy population. Then certainly they're doing something right when they're not seeing so many. Why is that the case? Why do we see such a stark contrast? I mean, I'll bring an example. In Australia, there was a shooting incident back in 1996, and after that, the government decided to ban all guns. It was the Port Arthur massacre in Tasmania, and there was never a single shooting or an active mass shooting of that caliber after guns were revoked. So Australia certainly took the right step. We don't see many countries in Asia dealing with active shooters, but yet time and again, we see the U.S. and Americans dealing with this, certainly pointing to the Second Amendment, but it doesn't look like that's solving the problem. Why is that different, Surya?
I think there's a slight correction as far as the Indian thing is concerned, because we have this word called encounters, and it's got a nasty appellation here in India. It means that it's been faked and a whole lot of people have been killed. And we've heard these encounters, police encounters happening during the terrorism days in Punjab. We hear of it in Kashmir, and more recently we hear of it in places like Chhattisgarh and Sukma and other places where Naxalites are active. So yes, encounters are happening. In the countryside in India, we don't know, I would understand that people are being killed in some way or the other by the police, either because they've broken the law or there's no evidence to convict them and the police just kill them. So many of these cases go unpunished, and that's the tragedy here. So it's not that killings don't happen, they do happen, but there's no justice. In that sense, there is an effort in the US to ensure that justice is meted out, no matter how long it takes. Here, unfortunately, that's yet to happen.
Absolutely. Let me go back to Glenn Carl standing by. Glenn, the sentiment from what I've heard from a lot of Americans when it comes to gun control is if an intruder breaks into your house and you're not armed, you are defenseless. So that's one of the big sentiments I've always heard. But going back to the issue at hand, the shooting in Orlando, a disgruntled employee, someone who was fired back in April, coming back to shoot former co-workers. This also brings about the issue of mental health and who really should have access to guns and the stricter process needed before guns are issued. How important is that? We saw that during Dylan Roof, the Charleston church massacre. There's a lot of regulations that need to probably be put in place, even if guns are going to be accessible to Americans. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually think that is a red herring argument, one intentionally put out to mislead the debate and divert it from the issue, which is the availability and pervasiveness of guns in society. Of course, every society has a given percentage of individuals who have mental issues and who may be inclined to violence or irrational behavior. Right. That is true. But the deaths by handguns are not a function, except in a small, tertiary way, from an issue of mental health. So this is one of the arguments put out by the National Rifle Association, actually, and the defenders of gun rights. But it shifts the debate away from the issue. And the issue is that, unlike what the National Rifle Association says, It's not people who kill, it's guns that kill,
Right.
or people who have guns that kill. So I think that's a false debate, frankly, and the data, I think, is pretty clear. But as always with these emotional, visceral issues, facts and data are almost irrelevant.
All right, Glenn Clower, we
Okay.
appreciate your input, as well as Yoshita Singh and Surya Gangadharan. Thank you so much for your perspective on this discussion about gun control and the shooting incident in the United States. Again, a quick recap: 5 people killed, including the gunman in Orlando. It happened this morning at a business place in Orange County, where police say a disgruntled employee opened fire before taking his own life. Police have not yet released the suspect's name, but we believe he's a 45-year-old man. And that does it for this edition of WION World is One News. I'm Archit Seshadri. Thanks so much for joining us.